Hey, life can change in an instant. 1 minute, everything feels normal, and the next, someone else's mistake turns your world upside down. That's when you need a team you can count on. NACE Law Group has been standing up for DC families for decades, fighting for neighbors hurt by medical malpractice, wrongful deaths, and serious injuries. They don't just settle quickly or push papers. They dig in, fight hard, and make sure every client gets the justice they deserve. And here's something we love. They're a longtime supporter of CityCast because just like us, they care about this community and the people who call it home. So if you've been hurt or someone you care about has, pick up the phone. Call NACE Law Group. They'll stand with you, fight for your family, and make sure your rights are protected. Visit WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com. That's WashingtonDCInjuryLawyers.com.
This podcast is brought to you by Wise, the app for international people using money around the globe. With Wise, you can send, spend, and receive up to 40 currencies and save up to 55% compared to major banks. Plus, Wise won't add hidden fees to your transfer. Whether you're buying souvenirs with pesos in Puerto Vallarta or spending euros to tip your Colosseum tour guide, you know you're getting a fair exchange rate with no extra markups. Join the 15 million customers who choose Wise. Download the Wise app today or visit wise.com/US/compare to learn more. Terms and conditions apply.
Today on CityCast DC, it's the question everyone's been asking since DOGE first showed up. How screwed is DC? A new program at the Brookings Institution called DMV Monitor pulls together a ton of data to help answer that question. And their most recent report is kind of a jaw-dropper. The region's unemployment has shot up 9 times faster than the rest of the country, with more to come. Brookings fellow Tracy Hadden is here to break it all down. Today is Monday, October 6th. I'm Michael Schaefer, and here's what DC is talking about. Before we get into the show, I wanted to give a huge shout out to the folks who became CityCast DC neighbors during our fall membership campaign over the last 2 weeks. Seriously, thank you.
Yes, CityCast executive producer Annie Reese here, and it has been so amazing and so gratifying. So thank you. Thank you so much. Your support means the world to us, and we'll also be sharing your local shout outs on the podcast.
Listen, our membership campaign officially wrapped on Friday, but here's the truth. We're super close to hitting our goals. In fact, if 20 of you listening right now join up, we would meet our goal and you could get back to regularly scheduled programming.
It's true. You know, Mike and I and the rest of the team, we're a little bit overachievers, maybe. You know, we like to do well. We like to hit our marks. And we're so happy about the progress that we've made. But we do need just a few more people to join. And we're so thankful to the people who have. But we do need a few more people to join. So you can do that at membership.citycast.fm. That's membership.citycast.fm. You know, this is a time where our world is more polarized and divided than ever. We're in the midst of a government shutdown. We're talking about the vibes in DC today on the podcast, all of which is kind of concerning. So really having a place to hone in on local issues is super important.
Yeah. And today's show is going to be a pretty good example, because it's more than just about vibes. We have a guest on who has deeply gotten into the numbers and the data and is able to give a pretty good picture, and with including some good stuff about what this era portends for our city.
It's true. So if you have been meaning to join but haven't yet, you were like, oh, shoot, I meant to join but didn't, then now is your time. You can do that at membership.citycast.fm. It's $10 a month for you. It's absolutely invaluable to us. So we really hope that you join.
All right, let's get into the show. Hey, Tracy, welcome to the show.
Hi, Michael. Thanks for having me.
For folks who don't know, explain what the DMV Monitor is and what kind of things you guys look at.
Sure. So DMV stands for District, Maryland, and Virginia. That's like the nickname for the
Yeah, we know that,
DC
Tracy. This is
CityCast. And the DMV Monitor is a data interactive project that we're standing up at the Brookings Institution, which is where I work. And we are tracking a playing card deck of both public and private data indicators to see what's happening in the region's economy in real time.
So you and your colleagues at Brookings wrote this report regarding federal downsizing and what it's going to do to the DC economy, what it's already done to the DC economy. Can you give us the sort of quick and dirty here? What'd you find?
Yeah. So I think, when the Trump administration started at the beginning of 2025, and the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, like first started doing layoffs, there was this question of like, obviously these changes are super impactful for the workers involved, but there was this bigger question of like, is it going to add up to something that actually has an impact on the whole regional economy? There's like 3 million jobs in the DC area. And so...
And how many of those 3 million are Fed jobs?
The federal share is about 10% in the region.
And if you add on top of that contracting?
So that's what no one knows, right? Because we don't... I think anecdotally, everyone knows that the private sector in the DC area is really intertwined with the federal government. But that was the big question, right? That if the region we've lost about 17,000 federal jobs so far, but that's out of 3 million. So it kind of sounds like a drop in the bucket, right? And so then the question is, what's happening to the private sector, right? In addition to the layoffs, there's been all these cuts to contracts and grants. And so what does that all add up to? And, I think earlier in the year, there was some hope that this was a punch in the gut, but that maybe the region's economy could absorb it and move on.
If you're speaking of that hope in the past tense, I guess that means that we're pretty screwed.
Yeah. So look, what we wanted to just ask this question in our study. And so, we looked at what's happening in the region's private sector in terms of jobs, and not just at the public data, from the Bureau of Labor Statistics about what's happening with job trends. But we also looked at private data by, for example, like scraping job postings and analyzing what trends are happening in the job postings that are going up for jobs in the region.
And I know from reading your report, there's a really scary chart in there that shows job growth in the DMV compared to the country and compared to other big cities. And it's not good.
Yeah. So I think we all know that the national jobs picture is not as good as, maybe the president was hoping, right? And that, job growth is slowing nationwide, but it is slowing in our region significantly more. Job growth is still positive in the other major metro areas in the country, but it has plateaued here in the DMV.
And so in the past, the truism was always like, Reagan came in and wanted to cut the federal government, but actually contracting grew and the region got wealthier. That doesn't seem to be the case this time.
Yeah, I think that's the difference this time, right? That, it's not just Reagan, right? That, the Clinton-Gore administration, remember reinventing government and getting rid of all the doing stuff on paper? There have been Democratic administrations in which federal employment has declined in a really big way. But the difference this time is that we're seeing this negative impact on the private sector side as well.
So pull out some of the other highlights or lowlights, as it were, from your report. The job growth has sort of screeched way downward. What does that mean for day-to-day life? What did you find in terms of unemployment, in terms of what this is going to do to can we afford our schools and roads and parks and stuff like that?
Okay, so let's talk about unemployment, but then I want to talk about what's happening to the region's innovation economy. All right, but let's start with the unemployment situation. So, unsurprisingly, when people lose their jobs, the unemployment rate goes up. And so unemployment is up nationwide. The federal government is the nation's largest employer. And so when that employer sheds jobs, it's not surprising to see that has macroeconomic impacts. My concern is that the unemployment rate is up 9 times as much in the DMV metro area compared to the national trend. That's because the impact is not just this direct federal job loss. It's all of the job loss that's happening at nonprofits, at contractors, but it's also the slowing of our innovation economy, right? So that's why I wanted to talk about that. 2024 was one of the best years in the region for venture capital flow to startups in this area, right? The DC area is a national AI innovation hotspot. There's a lot of cool stuff happening in biotech in the area too. And those startups had an awesome year in 2024. But what we're seeing in 2025 is that venture capital does not want to invest in startups based in the DMV.
Why is that? I mean, particularly since we're talking about the tech industry, which theoretically has like collapsed distance, so it doesn't matter if you're in the DMV or in Fiji. Why do they not want to invest here?
So, I think it probably has to do with just the issue that like the whole economy is interconnected, right? There actually isn't such a thing as like Democrat agencies and there isn't like a Democrat economy that we can cut while investing in a Republican economy. All these things are interconnected, and the bigger macro environment is now one of uncertainty. It might be the case that it's that like startups that were specifically based in the DMV, maybe they were here because government is a client and there's now much lower confidence that the government is a good customer.
I mean, it seems to me that makes perfect sense. And I think our people who brag about Washington having, moved beyond just being a government town and having this robust private sector often elide how closely the private sector relies on the government spending. But if you were to be starting a company, any company, and you wanted to find a large, sophisticated workforce that was eager for jobs, it would seem like this is a pretty good place to do so right now, particularly because of what's been going on in terms of what's happening to federal employees and contractors.
Yeah, but, kind of everything is connected to federal spending in ways that you don't expect. Like, for example, there's this cool biotech startup in the region that like uses a scientific discovery made at the University of Maryland to make like a new kind of like liquid bandage, kind of like a skin replacement. It's a very cool idea that obviously is going to have huge commercial possibilities, but being able to develop that kind of technology depends on the research that's mostly federally funded happening at universities and at the National Institutes of Health. So it's still downstream of federal spending.
Can we just like leaving aside the federal spending piece for a second? Because you mentioned innovation, and there's also a lot of concern, not just in DC, but in all of these cities like Washington that are like knowledge industry heavy, that this is the kind of job that's going to be the victim of AI going forward. The entry-level recent college graduate kind of job. I think a lot of people around here had like a sort of false sense of confidence, thinking that, well, the government's always a lagging indicator, so it'll happen to other employers before it happens to government, but maybe not. Either way, is there any thinking about what AI would be doing to government or will continue doing to government, even in a different administration?
I think that everyone's onto something with this concern that it really speaks to the entry level, and that AI is gonna end up changing the way that workers enter the workforce and grow up. What we see in the early data is like when we analyze those job postings, internships are down nationwide. There's been I think a 16% decline in internships.
And it's just about everyone I know who didn't grow up here came here for the first time to be an intern somewhere.
Yeah, well, so it's a 15% decline in internships nationwide. But here in the DMV, internships are down 36%. So whatever is happening right now, whether it's AI or DOGE or whatever, the impact is being very disproportionately felt by young workers.
And if internship is like the magnet that draws people here, or entry-level work in government is the magnet that draws people here, even if they wind up leaving government and starting a restaurant or widget factory or whatever, that seems like it's going to have some downstream effects no matter what happens in our politics.
Yeah, I mean, no doubt, right? Like, especially if you think about the District of Columbia itself, right? Like the city's population, it relies on a regular infusion of young college-educated people. If it wasn't for that demographic moving to the city, the city's population would be declining.
Hey, don't miss the Folger Theater's Julius X, playing now through October 26th at the Folger Shakespeare Library. This bold new play by Peabody Award-winning journalist Al Letson remixes Shakespeare's Julius Caesar with the history of Malcolm X, sampling lyrically and historically from Shakespeare's text, from famous speeches by civil rights leaders, and from Letson's own verse. Called Urgent and Timeless by the Washington Lobbyist, Julius X explores the cyclical nature of societal strife, as well as the shared human experiences of ambition, betrayal, and brotherhood. Tickets start at $20 and can be purchased online at folger.edu or by calling the box office at 202-544-7077. Tuesday through Sunday, 11 a.m. to 6 p.m. Get yours today. CityCast DC is made possible by the Peabody Institute of the Johns Hopkins University, presenting the Peabody Performance Series, a full season of free concerts at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg Center located at 555 Pennsylvania Avenue. The Peabody Performance Series brings the artistry and innovation of one of the nation's leading conservatories to the heart of Washington, D.C. With concerts and programs spanning jazz, classical, chamber music, opera, and dance, the series showcases Peabody's world-class faculty, accomplished students, distinguished alumni, and renowned guest artists. Each event invites audiences to react, reflect, and recharge through the arts while sparking dialogue on the role of performance in civic life. This fall, the series opens October 3rd with the Peabody Camerata in a program of powerful choral and chamber music. On October 8th, Peabody musicians provide live music for the film screening of the Academy Award-winning Netflix documentary The Only Girl in the Orchestra. Peabody Graduate Jazz Ensemble performs original works and new arrangements on October 31st. And on November 14th, the first Slang Lecture explores American roots music, led by distinguished visiting faculty artist Darren Atwater. While all the events are free, tickets are required for entry. The full performance schedule and ticket information is at washingtondc.jhu.edu. So I'm curious if the mayor of Washington, Muriel Bowser, has said her 2026 budget is intended to be a growth agenda. They talk a lot about this sort of new job creation. Have you consulted with the council and the mayor with regards to what's in your report?
So there's a task force called Greater Washington Together that has participation not just from the city's leadership, but also from other jurisdictions throughout the region. And I've been going to those task force meetings and sharing these findings. The deputy mayor for education for DC, Paul Kine, is at every one of these meetings. And, I think has a lot of, energy to, rethink how we're preparing young people for the workforce.
So what do you make of the mayor's, what she calls her growth agenda? Does that help solve some of these issues you've identified?
Well, I think that the city is making a lot of investments in just trying to make DC a great place to live, right? To your point that like the internet, shrinks distance. DC has to pivot to, being less office heavy and less dependent on federal jobs. And so making DC a more attractive place to live and adding more new residents is a smart strategy that the city's tax base, the city's revenue model is already like well adapted to exploit, right? Because the city has an income tax and is not like totally dependent on property taxes.
I'm wondering if anything the city is doing right now, or for that matter, Maryland and Virginia governments, actually is going to make things worse.
Yeah, I think this is why we wanted to do the DMV Monitor project, right? Because there are so many things happening at the same time, right? Like it's not just what the federal government and DOGE are doing. There's like all of these other factors in play as well. And so, our thought is that this kind of ongoing monitoring project will, help us get that like that closer look at like what's happening, for example, in individual counties. Like if you look at what's in the monitor for Montgomery County, for example, a lot of these indicators are really concerning. And it really does feel like the county is at like a really critical pivot point in, whether it can get some of these indicators to start going in a better direction.
Which are these indicators? Like, just lay that out for us.
So Montgomery County lost a higher share of its federal jobs than any other county in the region.
Meaning jobs that were based in Montgomery County.
Yeah.
In addition to however many Montgomery County residents got sacked from their jobs in DC or Virginia.
Yeah. Well, so what's interesting actually is that Montgomery County's the unemployment rate is measured by, where the worker lives. And Montgomery County's unemployment rate did not go up as much. The Virginia suburbs are where the biggest increases in the unemployment rate are. So, I think that does also just speak to the fact that, the Virginia counties is like where population growth in the DMV has been largely concentrated, right? And Montgomery County has not been growing. And so, that's like part of the problem for the county, that like a lot of the people who might have been living in Montgomery County are actually like living in Loudoun.
For those of us who like have covered the DC government for a while, there's nothing that's particularly new in this, in watching a Washington mayor stand up and say, hey, we're pivoting to the private sector. We're not going to have to rely on government anymore. And so on. This has been a concern for a long time, well before the second Trump era, well before the first Trump era, for that matter. And I'm curious, like looking at all these numbers that you look at, about how much of what's happened in 2025, for all the trauma that's been meted out, is like an acceleration of existing trends. Like I was amazed last year, we had a guest on who was talking about the federal workforce and said the average age was like well into the 50s, which says to me that it's been quite a while since they've been snapping up lots and lots of people at the beginning of their career.
Yeah. Remember sequestration? And how
for the uninitiated, let them know.
Yeah. So, this was back in the Obama era, but, essentially this was like a fight over federal spending. And during the sequestration time period, there was like a cap imposed on federal spending. And so there were a lot of federal layoffs that happened in the DC area. And there was also like a slowdown in federal procurement, right? And in other federal spending. And like everyone in the region was running around saying like, oh my God, we're so overexposed and vulnerable to federal spending and workforce trends. Like we got to diversify. I think that the issue is that it's not enough for every leader in the region to individually realize, oh, this has to happen. I'm going to do something about it. It's one regional labor market. It's one regional economy. And those leaders need to combine their efforts and achieve collective impact in order for it to really make a difference, right? A regional economy is a big ship to try to steer. And there isn't any one hand that can just like grab the wheel and make it happen. It's going to take all hands on deck.
So one of the things that people, I think if just having conversations over the back fence, you're always like one or two conversational leaps away from talking about real estate and whether the value of your house is going to collapse. And I'm wondering, how closely are you guys tracking real estate and the population, the story of a population exodus or people leaving and so on?
So for now, we're just looking at the data about active residential listings and prices. This is for owner-occupied homes that you can get from the realtors, and there has been a huge increase in active home sale listings in the region. Yeah, they're up nationwide. There's something like a 30% increase in home sale listings nationwide in 2025 compared to last year. The issue is that in the DMV, they're up twice as much as the national trend.
Are prices coming down?
So far, prices are pretty stable. They're down like just a little bit. And I think that speaks to the fact that proximity to power will always have value.
So what does it say to you that the number of listings is up by, what is it, 60% then, if it's twice the country?
I think we got to look into this more because to my earlier point that like a lot of stuff is happening at the same time, right? There's a big return to office mandate for the federal workforce. And so the increase in home sale listings is, the listings are up the most in the suburbs. And so that could be, workers who have an RTO mandate, who are realizing that they need a shorter commute because they're going to be doing it more and they want to move closer in. So it could just be churn within the region. But given that the listings are up the most in the jurisdictions that have had the highest increases in the unemployment rate, it also, could be related to job loss. And so we're actually looking at trying to find some more data to get so that we can understand better which of those things it is, or both.
How often do you guys publish monitors, and where can people find them?
So this is on brookings.edu/articles/DMV-monitor. And
you might want to get your people to think about their URL etiquette.
Yeah, no kidding. Super easy to find. We're still trying to figure out what cadence we can update at, but because I'm building this plane and flying it at the same time.
Flying it through a storm.
Yeah, but that's the reality. There is no easier job to get out there these days.
So I know this isn't exactly what your report was about, but I'm curious because you've been sort of steeped in all this data. How are you thinking about the future in DC in terms of the strength of the economy? Like based on trends we're seeing, can you throw us forward 1 year, 5 years, 10 years? Are we totally screwed? Give us some predictions.
I just don't think we can be totally screwed because when you look at these data and look at the fundamentals, our region is very strong. We have the second most educated workforce of any major metro area in the United States. Our crime rate is lower. Our credit is better. The fundamentals are very strong. That is not to say that there isn't, a painful disruption happening and that we don't have points of weakness, right? Like we need to build more housing. We need to diversify the economy. We need to address inequality. Those things are true, but they can be true at the same time as the fact that the fundamentals are very strong. And when the greater national macro picture is more conducive to growth, this regional economy, I think, is one of the places where growth and innovation will be anchored.
I got to tell you, one of the unique things about Washington is that unlike, Pittsburgh or Detroit or something, or even Boston, which has really reinvented itself, there is no muscle memory here for massive reinvention of the city's economy and the meaning and the hierarchy and all the things that come with it. And I worry that we're just not used to this. And given that human beings are kind of at their worst when they're scared and anxious, I feel like we're in for some rocky stuff.
Yeah, I think that's a super fair point, right? In part because the fundamentals are so strong here, it's you can get away with not working together, just kind of doing an okay job and not an amazing job, right? We haven't been through the crucible the way places like Detroit and New Orleans have in terms of weathering absolute catastrophe.
Well, on that cheery note, Tracy, thank you for being here.
Thanks for having me.
That's Tracy Lowe from Brookings DMV Monitor. All right, as we said at the top of the show, thank you to our newest CityCast DC neighbors, and there are a lot of them, which makes us even more grateful, but makes me kind of out of breath right now because I've got to read the names of Eric E., Michelle C., Brian L., Madeline K., Fallon K., Eric M., Brendan H., Julia H., Emma Y., Unji K., Allison D., Catherine K., Elizabeth F., Paul K., Adrian A., Lila E., Emil K., Rebecca L., we're still going, Yvonne J., Kevin S., Joanna S., David T., Robin L., we're within sight of the end, Marie Y., Fahimtola A., Mark J., Frank M., and Deborah E. Thank you all. And on that, that's all for today here on CityCast DC. If you enjoyed the show, why not tell a friend, rate the show, leave us a review, and for goodness sakes, subscribe to our morning newsletter. We'll be back tomorrow morning with more news from around the city. Bye.